On the 1st of July, the world's most pure capitalist economy comes under communist control. Hong Kong ends its 156-year-long tie to Great Britain and returns to China. The end of a 99-year lease on part of the land spurred the British to go ahead and return all of Hong Kong. The Chinese have promised no changes, but can they be trusted? Channel 8's John McKay joins us tonight after taking a first-hand look. John?
Well, Chip and Tracy, the answer we heard was a qualified "we shall see." Hong Kong sits on the southeastern edge of China. It is not one island, but more than 230, spread across a space about the same size as the Dallas-Fort Worth-Denton area. Now, Hong Kong is headed into uncharted territory. This has not happened before. No one there has forgotten the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989 in Beijing, when Chinese troops killed hundreds who were demanding democracy. China says that will not happen in Hong Kong, but memory of the massacre and the impending handover lend an eerie feeling to everything in the region, even religious holidays. Easter Sunday looks the same in Hong Kong as it does in Texas. Sounds the same too. But the 11,000 members of the Kowloon City Baptist Church face a new test of faith this year. China is coming, a China unfriendly to the religious within its borders. And not just Christians, practitioners of nearly every major religion. The handover takes effect at 12:01 a.m. July 1st. Later that morning, all the British flags will be gone. The British military, here for a century and a half, will disappear, replaced by the Chinese army. Hong Kong will truly be a part of communist China. But some things won't change. Business, for example. Hong Kong keeps the same successful capitalist economic system. Beijing's leaders may be communists, but they are also realists in need of investment capital and expertise from the West that Hong Kong already has. For 50 years, China promises no change in the economic, political, or social systems in the colony. And personal freedoms such as press and religious freedom. But civil libertarians ask, what if Buddhists, encouraged by that kind of promise, invited the Dalai Lama, no friend of China's, to visit? Or Muslims begin demonstrations supporting fellow Muslims fighting the Chinese army deep inside the mainland? And what about street preaching against acts by the state?
What is stated in the basic law is one thing. Whether it's going to be carried out, that's another thing.
Dr. James Chung, Kowloon City Baptist Church's senior pastor, says such concerns have already convinced some of his members to leave. The graduate of Fort Worth Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary still has strong ties there. The strongest of which is this man. Reverend Ellis Yao is pastor of Kowloon City Baptist, in Fort Worth now studying for his doctorate. He knows this is an uncertain time.
Many churches, they concerned about how to equip themselves well. They try to develop more leadership, and then they try to expand.
His church copes by reorganizing. Small groups now play a major role at Kowloon City Baptist. Lay leaders run them, keep members informed of changes, hold informal religious services. Though Dr. Chung hasn't changed his preaching, he must be careful.
I would not outspokenly encourage people to speak against any government or to go out and protest about anything. But I would talk to them about basic biblical principles. But when we see injustice, we are willing to stand up and to speak up. And they have to make their own judgment.
But churches aren't the only place in which the mainland government is concerned about how people express themselves. There's a much deeper fear about the media. Hong Kong is Asia's movie capital. Its action films make millions. Some worry China may interfere with the content of Hong Kong movies. And Hong Kong journalists already complain of intimidation. Even cartoonists say some newspapers ask them to ease up on criticism of the mainland. And China has warned no stories advocating independence for Taiwan or Hong Kong. But what does it mean to advocate independence?
If I interview a member of Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Parties, they are pronouncing that we will have an action plan towards an independent Taiwan. So we are reporting that story. Can we say we are advocating that story?
Next year, Reverend Yao finishes his studies here. He'll return to Hong Kong and Kowloon Baptist. But for the rest, life under China is weeks away. A test of faith for which Dr. Chung says the marching orders have already been given.
For those who are staying, we tell them, well, keep trusting God.
Chinese officials still insist there will be no limits on religious freedom. Supporters argue even Britain has some press restrictions on stories it believes threaten national security. Nevertheless, some of the proposed press restrictions are being reevaluated by China. Tomorrow night, doing business in Hong Kong, there are more Americans there than British now, and quite a few Texans. A look at the popular Fossil Watch Company, headquartered in Richardson. That's tomorrow at 10.
Okay, very interesting. Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. We'll look forward to that, and we'll look forward to rain this week, too.
I think so. There's storms in the outlook, but
In just 6 weeks, Great Britain turns Hong Kong back over to China, leaving communists in control of one of the world's leading capitalist economies.
For several North Texas businesses, the city is a key link in operations, so China's plans for governing the city of Hong Kong are crucial. Channel 8's John McKay recently returned from Hong Kong and joins us again tonight with part 2 of his special assignment. John?
Well, Tracy and Chip, American business seems cautiously optimistic about Hong Kong's future. The same entrepreneurial spirit that drove early Texans to the oil fields to find wealth infected Hong Kong long ago, and the Texans who live there. Hong Kong sits on the southeastern edge of China, near the island nation of Taiwan. Now, between now and July, you'll hear a lot about big business and Hong Kong. Tonight, a small, surprising Texas connection. The store is in Hong Kong, but if she makes the sale, some of the profit comes to Texas. Fossil watches are all the rage. And the company headquarters is here. Fossil started in 1984, combining fashion styling from Dallas-based artists with parts from around the world to make watches that changed with trends, or set them. But to assemble everything quickly and affordably, they needed Hong Kong.
They have an attitude in Hong Kong that if you can pick it up here in the United States, they can execute it and have it made in Hong Kong.
Enter Heath and Carla Carr.
It's a lot more intense than it was at home.
Carla's been with Fossil since 1989. Heath for about the same time.
Hong Kong is a very central place.
Now, it's not only central, it's home. Hong Kong time is 13 hours ahead of Dallas. So when workers on the day shift at the Richardson headquarters are leaving for home in the evening,
The power in the building was shut off.
Carla and Heath are riding to work. It's already 8 the next morning. 6.5 million people live in Hong Kong. Carla and Heath are just 2 of the 40,000 Americans. It was an adjustment at first for Carla.
Getting used to the day-to-day life of, you know, shopping for groceries, shopping department stores, not being able to find your sizes.
Strong work ethic, entrepreneurial spirit.
Another Texan turned Hong Kong resident, former Texas A&M President William Mobley. Some of America's top executives come to him for advice in doing business with China and to prepare for the coming Hong Kong handover.
So I think the investment community has pretty well discounted that there'll be major economic turmoil.
That, Mobley says, is because China is already here. $25 billion invested over years by the Chinese government in buildings, businesses. even that most capitalist of institutions, the Hong Kong stock market. So it is a more prosperous China that will be taking over here come July 1st. A China with an economic system Mao Zedong probably would not recognize. A wealthier China, but not necessarily a China that is more free. China's penchant for controlling information has already ruffled a few financial feathers. Some analysts claim China leaned on them to report only good things about business in China. Others claim the mainland government restricted access to financial information. Allegations China has denied. Nevertheless, it has not stopped investors or people from the world over from coming to Hong Kong.
In every year, the people moving into Hong Kong have exceeded the people moving out. 95, it was about 125,000 moving in and 45,000 moving out.
Hey, can you ask Chung about that order?
Despite worried relatives back in the U.S., the Texans who are here are staying. Heath and Carla Carr see July 1st as just another workday.
There's been a lot of changes, a lot of slow changes over the last several years, and I don't think there will be any dramatic changes.
I think for the business, I don't think it'll affect it really. Just because a lot of the manufacturing is done in China already and those relationships are already established.
Fossil's executives predict annual sales will soon hit $200 million. There were those who thought Fossil would fail in the beginning, considered it then, like some do Hong Kong now, a gamble. But throughout the territory's 150-year history, many have bet against Hong Kong's survival and lost. Gambling and taking risks are part of the lifeblood of this city. If there is money to be made in Asia, the Texans and others who live here believe Hong Kong is destined to make most of it. So does China. Business confidence in Hong Kong remains at an all-time high. In fact, a new airport will be opening soon to facilitate even more business and tourist travel to Hong Kong. Tomorrow night, a closer look at some of the people of Hong Kong, why some are smiling and excited about the handover, while others are still worried but have not left. That's tomorrow at 10.
Okay. Thank you very much, John.
John, I've been to Hong Kong. It's a bustling city, but we have a lot of activity right here in North Texas. Just 6 weeks of British rule remain for Hong Kong. Communist China will take over the colony on July 1st. It marks the end of 150 years of some sort of British control.
Channel 8's John McKay was just in Hong Kong and joins us tonight with some vignettes about the people of Hong Kong and how they're reacting to the upcoming change. John?
Well, Chip and Tracy, as you know, it's people that make the best stories, how they'll like us, not like us, their children, and their future. There are 6.5 million people in Hong Kong, mostly Chinese, some British, some American. They have much in common, but it's also a community of contrast, not just in people and culture, but in the land. Steve Brown watches the border.
I mean, you're not going to get much closer to China without a passport.
He commands one of 3 Hong Kong police divisions patrolling the border.
That's the river. That's China.
There's nowhere near the tension we expected to find on the border between communism and free enterprise. As we watch children and farmers on the China side, no one makes a mad dash for freedom. But others from deep inside China do try to escape, running not to this Hong Kong, but this one, just 15 miles away. Fast, wealthy, more Rolls Royces per capita than any place on earth. A venture capitalist's heaven. But for some, there is trouble in this British-ruled paradise, like the poor of Hong Kong. Men like 58-year-old Ma Quan Wan. He and 65 other men call this room home. This bunk bed, enclosed in a cage, is all he has. How long have you been living here in this building and in this cage here?
For about over 30 years.
30 years. Now, that's not 30 years living in Kowloon or Hong Kong, but 30 years living in this facility, this cage?
There is public housing, but the average wait for a man like Ma, 58, no family, is 9 years. Perhaps, he says, the change to Chinese rule can help. Maybe, maybe not. Here's what we do know. On July 1st, most of Hong Kong keeps its capitalist system and becomes a special administrative region of China. But things will be different. The British military will be gone, the Chinese army in their place. The current legislature shut down, replaced by one appointed by China. Most who live in Hong Kong will barely notice. Business, no matter how British, will be conducted as usual. The Royal Hong Kong Police will still be the police, but without the Royal. And mornings in Victoria Garden will still be filled with hundreds of people engaged in Tai Chi for daily exercise. But for the thousands of domestic workers here on guest worker visas, the government change already arouses fear. Most of them are from the Philippines, sending money home each month to family.
Leaving our place is the only way to uplift the standard of our living. Yeah, that's all.
Here you can live pretty well then.
Yeah, better.
Despite assurances from China, they worry they'll be kicked out and replaced by people from the mainland. Some people have fled Hong Kong, but most longtime residents like Irene Ong and husband Liu Kwai Wan remain. They have good jobs, but mixed feelings about the future.
Well, I'm excited because, you know, it means that Hong Kong's going back to China, our motherland. I'm more worried about my kids' generation. Also, like the education system, is that going to be changed? And that will affect the chances later to get better jobs.
Yes, we have running water. Yes, we have indoor toilets.
And any talk of foreigners still rushing to get out is nonsense, Dallasites Mary and John Weir told us. They could have returned to Texas earlier this year when John's construction design contract ended.
Now becomes Rebecca's room. China has absolutely no reason to do anything, and we're just going to go on with life just as before.
The only people who have left this year all left because their 3-year contracts came up and it was time to move on to the next place, and they were all very disappointed.
Let's have a quick look at the fence here.
The political barriers between Hong Kong and China may be coming down, but not the physical ones.
It looks formidable, right?
To avoid mass immigration, the border fences, the guards, and Steve Brown will remain.
12, 14 feet high, expanded metal mesh with the 2 rolls of Dannet wire on the top. It takes a determined illegal immigrant about 15 seconds to get across it.
15 seconds?
With luck, that's the only thing that will break the tranquility along the China-Hong Kong border, as both sides prepare to make history.
Look at those hills. And just imagine, it's part of my constabulary duties to go and walk through those hills. Make sure there's no bank robbers, villains, other ne'er-do-wells, rapscallions, and highwaymen. Beautiful.
It should be pointed out that China's ultimate goal is reunification not just with Hong Kong, but Taiwan. And Taiwan is home to the Chinese nationalists ousted by Mao Zedong after World War II. As you might imagine, the people of Taiwan still harbor a very strong distrust of the mainland. As we move closer to the actual handover of Hong Kong, we'll have other stories, of course, on the colony and its preparations for Chinese rule.
Okay, looking forward to it. Thank you, John. And it just rained cats and dogs for a little while this morning, but
Prince Charles' residence for the ceremony, the Royal Yacht Britannia, has arrived. The last time it will enter a Hong Kong that is part of the British Empire.
I think that Hong Kong is an astonishing Chinese success story.
For Chris Patton, the last colonial governor, the final week has allowed him to think back.
What would I have done if I'd been Prime Minister in the United Kingdom for the last 5 years? I think, as things have turned out, I'd have appointed myself Governor of Hong Kong.
The British military leaves with Patton, some assigned here for years.
Lots of money, yeah.
Well, they're two extremes, really, aren't there? There's a great deal of money or a great deal of poverty. It's very, very stark, the contrast, if you like. But it's a place of constant change, you know. Everything is banging and crashing and vibrant the whole time. It's very difficult to find anywhere that's really tranquil.
British forces have protected Hong Kong for 150 years. Only a few hundred remain from the 9,500 stationed here a few years ago.
I think we've got more than just the legacy of deterrence to leave behind. We've actually helped people in Hong Kong, and I hope that's what they'll miss.
But not all the British are leaving. Steve Brown of the Royal Hong Kong Police commands a third of the border area. He's staying.
But they're in trouble because they've not got a flag up. The Union flag isn't going to be flying for much longer. Let's keep it up as long as we can.
China will keep the police force, minus the word royal, and keep the border to restrict immigration from the mainland. Brown believes Hong Kong will change, but so will China.
The door's too wide open. They can never turn the clock back. People have learned how to earn money and the benefits you get from earning money.
It has fallen to the British Army's Black Watch unit to be the final representatives here. This time next week, they'll be gone too. Their presence here, like a British Hong Kong, just a memory. Despite 150 years of British rule, the Chinese traditions of Hong Kong have survived. This may be Victoria Park, but the rhythmic exercises practiced here are unmistakably Chinese. The handover has many people excited, some looking forward to new job opportunities, others like herbalist Amy Poon hoping the new regime will tighten qualifications for jobs already here.
With the new system, then all the really qualified professional ones will be retained through the exams, and all the bad ones, the illegal ones, then could be disqualified. And that will preserve the reputation of the Chinese herbal medicine.
Welcome to Dallas. Thank you. In the center of the change, Anson Chan, who's currently second in charge in Hong Kong. She keeps her job after the handover. The constant China hopes will give residents and business leaders the confidence to stay in Hong Kong.
We know in Hong Kong that in order to continue to grow economically and to have the means to improve the standard of living of our people, we need to maintain our human freedoms. We need to allow political reforms to continue.
China has promised the capitalist system here will continue, but with a few changes in the basic law or constitution it signed along with Britain, restrictions on protests in the media, and replacement of the elected legislature, at least temporarily, with an appointed one. Chan and others have objected to the changes, but they will apparently remain, passed on the first day by the new legislature, for which Rita Fan will serve as Speaker.
In the basic law, we have more democracy than ever has been promised to us by the British government.
So for some Hong Kong families, escapees from communist China years ago, serious questions are about to be answered. Is China really different, or did they simply not run far enough the first time? John McKay, Channel 8 News, Hong Kong. Hong Kong residents love to gamble, but never in 156 years of British rule have the stakes been higher than in the coming handover. Thousands are preparing for the ceremony, but after it's over, here's what you'll see. Hong Kong's thriving capitalist economy, untouched. In the new constitution or basic law, China promises no changes in Hong Kong's political and economic system for 50 years. Colonial Governor Chris Patton will leave, replaced by Tung Chee-hwa, China's pick as top territory executive. Just about everything else from police to trolley cars stays the same. So the only thing we'll learn about Chinese rule of Hong Kong Monday is
how much of a non-event the handover will be in terms of practical changes or any tangible changes to people day in and day out here.
But business experts do have some long-term concerns.
I think there's concern that there'll be a gradual erosion of freedom of the press and other kinds of freedoms, that it won't be a dramatic thing, but it could be over time.
The Chinese want no news stories on independence for Hong Kong or Taiwan, no criticism of the mainland leadership.
Jesus Christ gave us hope.
Churches can stay open, but will they be controlled like churches in China? The basic law says no, but
what is stated in the basic law is one thing. Whether it's going to be carried out, that's another thing.
And down the road, restraint of freedom of expression, experts warn, could bring serious business problems.
Our freedoms are, or some of them are cut back, including the press freedom, including the availability of economic information about China, then I'm afraid in the long term, companies may well pull out of Hong Kong.
Many Hong Kong residents have gambled with their own lives before, fleeing China, starting a new business or career here. But the stakes this time are even higher, because the handover will affect not just their future, but their children's. John McKay, Channel 8 News, Hong Kong. Hong Kong has been good to refugees, people fleeing oppression and threats of death. Here in Asia's bustling financial capital, their dreams of a life without want became real. But for hundreds of Vietnamese boat people, like this woman and her 3 children, the dream has ended here at Pillar Point Refugee Center.
Would you like to go to America?
Of course.
Like many at Pillar Point, America won't take Jessica right now. Though she has 2 uncles in California, they cannot send for the family until they get jobs. So the wait continues.
They're not illegally in Hong Kong, but they're not legally in Hong Kong, they're not permanent in Hong Kong. And Vietnam won't take them, and they have no place to go.
Plus, China wants all the refugees gone and the camp closed before the handover, leaving residents in a kind of international limbo. And there are other problems.
When you take a look at the barbed wire, you see the chain link fence, and you see the patrolling guards, you'd think that you might be in some kind of prison. But the fact is, all this is designed not to keep people inside, but to keep outsiders from sneaking in.
The guards catch those outsiders selling drugs, recruiting drug dealers, and providing fake ID to residents frustrated about their future. The staff helps residents cope with job training and work opportunities.
The more self-reliant Vietnamese refugees are, the better resettlement cases they become.
But if Pillar Point has any hope of shutting down before the handover, several countries, including the U.S., must ease their immigration restrictions.
In fact, in 96 actually, Austria accepted more than 40 people, some of whom either had minor convictions or someone in their family had minor non-drug related convictions.
But that's only one country, and hundreds are waiting. So refugee workers predict on July 1st, Pillar Point will still be here, open. Its residents like Jessica still waiting, hoping to learn something about the next place they can call home. The British started activities with their own flag-lowering ceremony, carried on with Prince Charles and Chris Patten, the last colonial governor of Hong Kong, looking on. Through sometimes heavy downpours, the military unit went through its paces with no shelter from the storm. On the other side of the border, China moved the first of some 4,000 troops up to the border crossing, something the British had asked they not do
and President Clinton watched from Washington.
We don't know yet that they intend to violate the agreement. They may be concerned about the disruption, disorder. We'll just have to see what happens.
I propose a toast to the sovereigns.
But back in Hong Kong, the Chinese troop movement did little to dampen the mood, as officials from Britain and China gathered for joint services marking the occasion.
We shall not forget you, and we shall watch with the closest interest as you embark on this new era of your remarkable history.
The flag ceremony itself went like clockwork, with troops from both sides and the Hong Kong police marching in within 2 minutes of the midnight deadline. With a minute remaining, the British flag came down. And at exactly midnight, Hong Kong police and Chinese troops raised their flags. Chinese officials promised Hong Kong will stay the same.
Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong and a high degree of autonomy and keep the previous social-economic system and way of life of Hong Kong unchanged.
But that was the last joint event. Prince Charles and Chris Patten boycotted the swearing-in of Hong Kong's new Chinese-appointed leadership, leaving aboard the Royal Yacht Britannia. American Secretary of State Madeleine Albright also stayed away.
I believe it's very important for us to have sent a very strong political message that we had thought that the legislature that had been elected was the one that should continue.
No one knows if China got that message. As the fireworks exploded above the new Hong Kong, the appointed legislature began its first meeting and passed new laws.
Someone in their family had minor non-drug related convictions.
But that's only one country, and hundreds are waiting. So refugee workers predict on July 1st, Pillar Point will still be here, open. Its residents like Jessica still waiting, hoping to learn something about the next place.